conversation today. Today's conversation is all about building generational wealth in our community. I invited a very good friend of mine, Erica Moore, to come in and talk with us. She, for a long time, has been doing this Women in Wine and Wealth.
Yes.
Women, Wealth, and Wine gathering. And I've known Erica for many, many years. She has been on the front lines working, especially in our community, to help us build our wealth. And, I'm so excited to have her come in and talk with us today. Don't forget to put your city and state in the chat so we can recognize you. We're going to give people a couple of more minutes to join in with us, especially on our social platforms, and then we are going to get started. I do want to make sure that everyone knows we have a couple of things coming up in terms of upcoming events. Tonight at 7:30. If you're a member and you want to learn how to invest in multifamily real estate, we do have a gentleman, Jonathan Nichols, coming in to talk about that. That's 7:30 this evening. You can check the email I sent yesterday with all the upcoming events. Click on the Zoom link in order to register for that. And next Monday, we have the incomparable Dr. Claude Anderson coming at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That is open to the public. That's our usual Monday fireside chat. If you don't know who Dr. Claude Anderson is, you better look him up. But he is the author of Powernomics and so many other books. And he's coming to talk with us about things that we can tangibly do to work as a community in order to build Black wealth. So the topic is Black Prosperity Matters. And he's coming to talk about that, of course, from his point of view. So want to make sure, again, check your emails or go to the10kproject.com and check the calendar of events, and you're able to sign up there for those of you who are watching. Don't forget, everybody, to put your city and states in the chat so we can recognize you. I see Virginia. We have a lot of Virginia in the house right now, so we want to definitely recognize everyone who is here. And I feel like there's another thing I'm forgetting. I usually have my list here, but it is, sorry everybody, my list is all over the place. Oh yeah, and then we have another person coming to talk about opportunity zones. I am working on scheduling the date with him, but we know that legislation was passed and we haven't heard about it since it first passed. Everyone was talking about it and then they stopped. Well, let's talk about it again. Let's see where we are. Vinroy July is somebody who's worked on the ground with the opportunity zones, and he is going to come and give us a debrief on what's happening with that and how we can get our fair share of that money that's coming into the opportunity zones. So with that, it's 3 minutes after the hour, so I want to say hello to everybody. Hello, Erica. Haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I'm so thrilled to be here. Hello, hello.
So today's topic is all about wealth building and building generational wealth. Why don't you tell us, I always like to start off with people's philosophy or, their mission or their vision with regards to building Black wealth. What are your thoughts about it? Where do you come from, with regards to educating people, and what are some of the principles that you suggest people follow?
Yeah, thank you. So for me, I have worked for many years with individuals, families, and small businesses primarily. And so one of the key things that I focus on is people working on their personal economy. We hear everything on the news about what's going on in the US economy and the world economy, but what is really going to have the biggest impact on The folks that I work with and their families and their communities is what's going on in their personal economy. How are they set to weather storms like the one we're going through right now? I think, COVID has revealed a lot of things to people about what's going on in their personal economy. And so, from an education standpoint, I like to teach about the foundational things: how to protect your money, how to grow your money, and then how are you going to have your money distributed, at the end when you're ready to retire. So, those key three things are what I focus on in my education, the foundational things.
And I'm a big fan of people looking at their personal economies as well. Yes, we're due reparations. I always say that. Yes, we are looking at the big things that are happening in government. But for a lot of us, for most of us, people come on to platforms and they have these, what I call grandiose concepts or ideas of, all of Black America should get together and we should, march for this or do this. And I come from the point of view of, okay, but if there's a racial, well, we know not if, there's a racial wealth gap, right? The average white family is worth 185,000. Our average family is worth anywhere from 18 to 25,000. If we can just get your family, on par, right? And then if your family is able to pass down that wealth to the next generation, and then their kids are able to pass down that wealth to the next generation, and we're able to do that for 1 million, 2 million, 5 million Black families, well, then we've cut it there. So I'm very much let's build it from the ground up. And that's why I like you, because you're very much a person that's, like you said, your personal economy and thinking about that. And I can definitely go with that. So let's say that we have someone who is starting off from zero.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe they've been working for 15 years now. Maybe they're fresh out of college, but they're starting off with zero. They haven't accumulated any assets, or, they barely have an emergency fund, if at all. What are some of the foundational things that you suggest for those types of individuals?
I'm always excited even when I find someone who's starting at zero, because unfortunately, so many of us are starting at below zero. We're in debt. And so taking a look, a realistic, comprehensive look at what's going on all around. So we take a look at the debt situation. We take a look at cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out. Sometimes there are simple, easy things that can be done that will resolve a problem. I'll give you an example. I met a young lady. She had been coming to our events for probably a couple of years. And after an event, she cornered me and she said, my finances are a mess. I don't even think you could help me. And I said, I tell you what, let's give it a try. She scheduled an appointment. She came in and she had this very neatly organized binder of all of her stuff. Well, that was clue number one, that it probably wasn't as big a mess as she thought. So I spent a little time looking through her budget and other things. And what I determined was that there was one thing that was really just strangling her. She had this very high interest loan. That was taking, she was living paycheck to paycheck because of it. And I asked her, how have you been paying? And she said, I've paid on time. Everything's been paid on time. Great. So credit wasn't bad. I said, I bet if you go to the credit union and you ask them if they would refinance the other loan. She had two loans, and one of them was at a reasonable interest rate. I said, if you go to the credit union, I bet they would refinance that. And the amount that she'd paid off on the reasonable loan would have been enough to cover this one that was choking the life out of her. So she was a woman of action. The very next day, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone rang and she just sounded like a different person. She said, I think it's going to work. Right. And so she was able to refinance that original loan, pay off the one that was choking the life out of her. And that gave her $500 worth of breathing room. And from there, she just went on a mission. She paid off her car. She just used that extra money to put toward other debt. She paid off her car. She paid off her student loans. And last year, she bought her first house. And it was one little idea that she probably could have stayed up all night and not come up with it. Sometimes you just need another pair of eyes taking a look at what's going on, and you have to go into action. Because I can tell you, I've given similar advice to lots of people who were not people of action, and they didn't move on it. So it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to do it. And so, encouraging people not just to know the information, but actually take action. That's the key.
Yeah, and I think again, I'm just on this level right now where it's action, but it's also like a small action, right? I mean, the biggest action probably was the fear that she felt going to the credit union and thinking, oh my goodness, what if they turn me down?
Right.
But once you get past that, the small action of going and talking to the credit union, filling out the application, depending on the size of the loan, they probably didn't need any backup documents and maybe just a W-2 or something like that. Um, it's again, those little small actions that we're able to suggest to people where they're like, oh, is that it? And next thing you know, you have a whole new life. And $500 a month is nothing to sneeze at. I
Not at
mean,
all.
you could take that and put it towards an emergency fund. You can take that and invest portions of it, get out of debt with other things, accelerate your debt payment. There's so much that you can do with that kind of money.
Yeah, that was 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And financially, she is a completely different person today from that one, that one action. And I think her biggest fear in the beginning was asking for help. People sometimes, a lot of times, I think, are embarrassed about how they have managed things up until this point. I
Yeah.
operate in a no judgment zone. And so because I've made my own mistakes,
Mhm.
and I'm thankful that I have worked with people that didn't judge me and were there and willing to help me. I think the other thing is there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there are a lot of scams out there, and people aren't sure who to trust either.
Yeah.
And so, those kinds of things can stop folks from asking for help when they need it. So,
Yeah. And you're right. There are a lot of scams out there. And one thing that you said this young lady did was she came and she watched you for 2 years. So that also lets me know about, tenacity from your point of view, living, in that judgment-free zone, welcoming people in, having, even with what we're doing, there'll be, people who watch us for 2 years before they finally step in and say, okay, yeah, I'm finally ready to tackle that. And I do think sometimes with fixing your own economy, it's a matter of timing as well. Sometimes the timing is just all wrong. If you have a
right.
lot of other stressful things, it's like starting a diet. You can't start a diet just at
Oh, we
any
can't talk
time.
about that one.
I know, and that like yes, I've gained the quarantine 15, I admit it. But yeah, but there are times where you just get to a point where you make a decision. Like Latrice is saying, I need to refinance my car loan. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? It's December 1st. By December 10th or December 15th, I'm going to have this, at least researched and a plan of action created, or, you know, I'm going to approach the credit union or whatever it is that you need to do. What are some of your other thoughts with regards to the plans of action that people may want to embark on for this process?
Well, I really think it boils down to habits. The
Mhm.
habits that people create around saving money, around how they spend their money. We have lots of choices available, and I have yet to see a situation that isn't fixable. The It may not be something that a person I'm working with or a business I'm working with wants to do. They may not be ready to do it, but I have yet to run into a situation that's not fixable. So, working on those foundational things that I talked about when it comes to protection. You could have the best plan in place. You could have a plan that's going to get you from where you are to exactly where you want to be in the time frame that you want. But if you haven't covered the what if scenarios, one bump in the road can throw you completely off course and put you back to square one. And so I think it's important to make sure that all of those what ifs that you can handle are taken care of.
Mhm.
Even from the standpoint of budgeting, I look at people's budgets all the time, and they will have all of the fixed expenses taken care of, the utilities, the rent, the mortgage, all the fixed expenses, but no what ifs. And no, and not even the things that happen not on a regular cycle, or not on a monthly cycle, I should say. Things like in Virginia, we pay personal property taxes, right? We pay them every single year. Why do they come as a surprise to people and throw them off their budget? Whereas I teach a budgeting strategy that has someone plan for that. If you paid $1,200 last year, that's $100 a month. Set that aside so that you have as few what ifs or bumps in the road or things that throw you off as possible. So simple little techniques like that that get you in the habit of doing things on a consistent basis will create a lot of stability for people. The other thing is, the what if. What happens if, my plan is to work until I'm age 65, but what if I get sick at age 55 and I'm not able to work for a couple of years? Putting things in place that are going to deal with those sorts of things are going to keep you again on an even keel. What if we have a pandemic? Like, none of us anticipated that.
Nobody anticipated that. Yeah, I don't think, I think there's some what ifs that you just will never anticipate.
No. And that's what your emergency fund is for. The what if we have a pandemic? That's why you've got an emergency fund that is going to float you for 3 months or 6 months, so that if we have a situation like this and you may have to reinvent yourself as a result of it, that you have an emergency fund that gives you a little breathing room, that you're not stressed out after week 1. I remember when the government shut down, was that like a couple years ago, and people who are highly paid were in food lines after less than a month of not receiving a paycheck. That's revealing, right? So obviously there weren't emergency funds in place. Those are what ifs that we can plan for.
Right.
The pandemic we couldn't, but that's why we've got that emergency fund that will take care of us.
But I do think we are able to plan for what ifs overall. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Number one, what if a recession happens, right? We had Dr. Cherie Phillips here last night, and she is an economist, and she talked about the fact that we are in a recession. Well, we know recessions happen at least every decade, right? What if a recession happens? Well, my answer is and has been, how can I set up multiple streams of income where some of them hedge the bets against others so that no matter what, there is income coming in? And I think that's where we start to be strategic in our life cycles. Another what if artificial intelligence takes your job, or some sort of technology takes your job? Then what do you do? I do think, again, I never would have thought pandemic, and I've been writing business plans for a decade and seen a lot. I never would have thought pandemic. However, I do think we can have these structures of anything could happen, what if, and then how, what are some different ways that we're able to still make it no matter what.
I'm in agreement with you.
I'm sorry?
I'm in total agreement with you about multiple streams of income. Having a job, having a business, having other ways, having assets that are throwing off cash to you, whether it's investments or other investments, real estate investments, things that throw off income to you that don't involve you going to work. And for some people, that may seem like something that's way into the future. And which is why it's important to actually have some guidance. So I love what you're doing with the 10K project and bringing all of these different professionals together to share these ideas. These are ideas that some people have not been exposed to. And, just turning that light bulb on gets us, gets our creative juices going so that we can see ourselves putting those things in place for ourselves and our families. It's important. We have been left out of this conversation for, centuries, really. We've been left out of the conversation, and for us to create that conversation for ourselves, I think is magnificent. So I commend you and the other leaders in this project.
Yeah. So another thing you mentioned is stuff you don't pay all the time, which I can personally attest to this. I have a life insurance bill, I don't know the other term for it. That's like the investment term for it, right?
Right.
That comes once a quarter. And no matter what, once a quarter, I'm always like, oh my goodness, I have to pay this bill again. Because it is like one of those once a quarter things where it's not an annuity. I'm trying to say instead of it's a bill, it should be something I'm investing in or feel
If
good
it's growing
paying.
cash,
But,
it is an
but I
investment.
do feel like, oh my gosh, I have to pay this again. And I do recognize that we set it up when I became a homeowner so that if anything happened to me, the mortgage would be paid and
Sure.
my mother would not have to worry about that. Like she would, I'm very much a proponent of um, if you own your house and you have good health and you've got a few dollars in the bank, you could weather a lot in this country. So that's like my responsibility while I have a mortgage. Well, no, this isn't mortgage insurance. So Felicia is saying this is mortgage insurance. This is just a plain life insurance policy. However, um, our purposes for it is to pay principal plus have a little bit of extra cash in case something happens to me prematurely. So,
Well, the reality is mortgage insurance is life insurance.
mhm. Yeah,
So
I mean, if you're setting it up correctly, yes, then so we have the life insurance, and obviously, if I'm dead, my mother can use it for whatever she wants to use it for. But I strongly urged her, and she has a policy as well, where if something happens to her, then the house is paid for, and I can at least have some flexibility, and I think that's a really big thing. So yeah, but going back to those bills that come, I don't think it's so much that we're surprised. I hope not. For me, it's more so like, you're chugging along, and then all of a sudden this extra bill comes through the mail, or
yeah.
pops up on your email, and you're like, okay, my um, budget for the month is not going to be the same as the other months because I have this extra money coming out. Even though I understand what you're saying, like you should just put it to the side and and have it there already. The final thing that I will say is I was broke several years ago. And I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fix this. Like there was something very personal that happened that let me know how broke I was.
Mm.
And I think everybody, once you have that trajectory, you have that what do you call it, the bottoming
But like
out
day of
story.
disgust is what I call it.
Yes, the day of disgust. I had the
Yep.
day of disgust, absolutely. And it took me about it didn't take that long. It took me about 5, 6 months to really pull myself out of it, get some cash in the bank, feel comfortable. And I distinctly remembered I had to take my car in for something special. And everybody knows the dreaded, you take your car in and what's
For
the
one
repair
thing.
bill?
Yep.
And it ended up being $400. And I felt so proud that I could give him my debit credit card, and he could swipe it. I wasn't worried about, is there enough money in there?
Yes.
Or he's taking all of my money. I can't pay for anything else. There is something, there's a sense of relief when you have your finances together. And, obviously, if it was a $40,000 bill, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But just those little small things. There's a report that I keep hearing about that the average American couldn't put $500 together for an emergency, and how scary that is. I'd love for you to talk about you know that from an emotional point of view, as well as the day of disgust, and anything else with regards to what I've been saying.
Yeah, it's stressful. And we all know that stress leads to health issues and all of that. So when people are living paycheck to paycheck, it affects just about everything in their life, from marriages to relationships with children to relationships really with friends. It consumes you when you are in a position where you struggle to pay your bills, or whether when you're barely making it. And so, yeah, you said it took you 4 or 5 months. And for most people, that's about right. But it's 4 or 5 very intentional months of work. And when I said earlier that I have not seen a situation that can't be turned around, I meant that. looking at a person's income, outlay of cash, how they're spending, if they're willing to be vulnerable enough to share that information, there is help available. So for some people, it might be cutting back on the eating out. I know even when my husband and I got really, really serious about turning our finances around and really getting, the money in the bank that we needed, saving at a rate that was going to get us to retirement and all of those things, we looked at every penny we were spending. And that's what it may take for someone, is to really take a look at every penny that they spend. One of the things we uncovered was we were spending way too much money on coffee. And that's almost embarrassing for me to admit. But for me, I had a Starbucks habit. For him, it was 7-Eleven, a little less expensive. But nonetheless, we were spending an outrageous amount on coffee and eating out. And so when people look at things like that, they look at it as, oh, it's $3, no big deal. They swipe their card through and they don't think about it. So a couple of things, and it's a little tougher probably to do this during the pandemic. I mean, I have cash in my wallet that's been there for 6 months. People aren't spending cash right now. But when we're back to that, one of the techniques that I offer to and share with clients is try taking out the money for your disposable stuff in cash, right? Set a limit, right? So I remember doing this with my children. They were younger and we had a certain amount of money for entertainment. Let's call it $50 a month. That was entertainment. So if they said, Mom, can we go to the movies? They started saying after a while, Mom, is there any money in the entertainment slot, right? Instead of, can we go to the movies? But if there was money there, the answer was yes. If there was no money there, then that meant we had to figure out, maybe it was going to be at home game night, right? I did that for groceries even. I set a budget for groceries and I took that money out in cash. And when it was gone, look, it didn't mean we starved. It meant we went to the pantry and the freezer. We did not starve. We made it, but I knew exactly how much I had agreed and decided to spend on groceries, and I spent not a penny more. So there are ways to get a handle on that. It's going to involve some sacrifices. It may mean you don't get the new shoes or the new dress or whatever yet. I heard this on a podcast I was watching the other day, and I loved it. He said, what do you want now versus what do you really want? And so, yeah, maybe I want to go out to dinner right now, but what I really want is financial security. What I really want is a fully funded retirement account. What I really want is for my kids' education to be paid. So do I want to go out to dinner now, or do I want the things that I really want? And sometimes you just have to ask yourself those questions every time you're going to make a purchase that isn't a necessity. What do I want now versus what do I really want? And that can stop a lot of those impulse purchases and buying of things that we don't need. We buy things oftentimes to make ourselves feel better. And that just continues the trap. It's kind of like eating. I ate something I didn't want, made me feel better now, but ultimately it's not what I really want. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I
getting in
mean,
the habit
so
of,
I did the envelope, I called it the envelope method.
yes, exactly.
But mine was a little less restrictive in a way. What I did was I had a set amount and okay, this was my real process. And I saved so much money during this period of time. I said on the 5th, the 15th, and the 25th, I get to go to the ATM and I got to pull out X amount of dollars, right?
Mm,
And then from that money, I can't remember how much money it was. I don't even want to say it, but from that money, what I had was one envelope. So I didn't do groceries versus this versus that. What I did was I said, okay, everything that I had my bills, like rent payment and all of that came from a separate, fund.
right, right.
But my envelope money was groceries, hair, nails, because I like, yeah, I can tell, I like my nails. Even though I've been doing my nails from home lately, and I'm like, okay, I could
Me
continue
too.
this. So it was groceries, hair, nails, and like going out to dinner with friends, and anything that was like, outside of my bills. And I would literally open up the envelope, right? And let's say I know my hair appointment is coming up in 5 days. I know how much the hair appointment is going to be. Okay, Cherie, well, your hair is important to you, so you have to, take that. So you have less money during this specific 10-day cycle. And then what I liked for me was that every 10 days I get to get more money. It gets to
Mm,
get replenished. So for me, that cycle worked. Now, I will say, because we are in a cashless or contactless society right now, depending on the bank that you have, you may be able to open up a separate checking account. Let's say you're at a credit union, for example, you're able to open up a separate checking account, and that could be your envelope,
discretionary
right?
fund. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be your envelope. Or if you are at, a major bank and it doesn't cost you anything to open up that separate account,
Right.
and you're able to get the debit credit card, and then you just check your balance every morning. Okay, well, that's how much I have. If you have a W-2, you are able to have them separate, like the money going into your envelope account from the money going into your regular account for your regular bills. And then you could also have money going into your savings account as well. I haven't had a job, a W-2 in many, many
Right.
years, but if I still had a W-2, I think sometimes we don't take advantage of these things that our employer naturally does for us. As an entrepreneur, you just kind of have to say for yourself, okay, every dollar that comes in, some money goes over here, some money goes over here. You have a little bit more control over it.
But creating
Also,
that
for some
system,
people, I'm sorry.
as in creating that system, and what you
Mhm.
just said, whatever it is that works for you, there are lots of different systems,
Yeah,
and not all of them are going to work for everybody, but having
yeah,
one that works for you and establishing that and sticking to it will make all the difference in the world. You know
yeah.
exactly where that money's going, and automating it like you just described,
Yeah.
um,
I think people
so you
just
don't
aren't
see it.
creative. Not, I won't say they aren't creative. I think that we can be more creative. Let me say that. I think we could be more creative in the pandemic and post-pandemic world, because we're getting to a point where a lot of businesses that are contactless these days may not go back to
I
accepting
agree.
cash.
I agree.
So when we start talking about building our own economy within our house, we need to consider different ways that we're going to handle this post pandemic. You know, so we talked about getting from broke to comfortable. Let's talk about. So I have three sections here that I came up with as you started talking.
Yeah.
Broke to comfortable is section one. Comfortable to wealthy is section two, and then generational wealth, passing lessons on to our kids, is section three. So, well, let me take a step back. Did you have any other tips for the broke to comfortable cycle that people may be going through?
Maybe just one piece of motivation. And this is
Mhm.
something that I've done at a number of different wine women and wealth. There's one session that we do where we take a look at where we're spending and where we could cut, right? Most
Mhm.
people are not going to go to nothing. Like, I'm not going to tell you I never go to Starbucks, right? That doesn't work. I did buy a Keurig machine, so I don't go nearly as often. But when I look at how much we were saving between the coffee and the going out to eat, it was about $250, $300 a month that we were able to save. That didn't mean we never went out to eat. It just meant we cut back. So people think of it as $250, but it's not $250. I have a little calculator that that I run and show on the screen when I'm doing wine, women, and wealth. $250 a month over 25 years is almost $240,000. So do you want coffee and a couple of nights out to eat, or do you want an additional $240,000? And it's really that clear. But when people don't look at it in the long term, they see it as, oh, it's just a cup of coffee. Oh, it's just a sandwich out. It's not just a sandwich out. It's $240,000 that you could have in your comfortable retirement versus a simple pleasure today. So just putting it in perspective like that helps people to get the motivation they need to actually move forward and do those things.
Yeah, and I like your process, because I don't think that people should cut off absolutely everything. Otherwise, you're going to have a miserable life.
Yeah, they
The
won't.
whole point is for you to have a life that serves you now as well as serves you, 40 years from now when you're, ready to retire or deep into retirement. So,
Yeah. My
um,
experience is people won't stick with it. It'll be kind of like
yeah,
my P90X that's
yeah,
collecting dust in my home gym right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, which is why I like my envelope method of, look, this is your available, you can spend it on whatever you want. This is your available cash, and that worked for me. So then let's move to part two of life, which is comfortable to wealthy.
Yes.
Give us your thoughts with regards to that.
Yeah, again, I think it also involves habits, and it also involves educating yourself about, first of all, your comfort level in where you are investing your money, how you're investing your money, the types of things you're investing in, and really, just educating yourself about that. I think there's also some balance to be struck between safe and guaranteed versus things that involve a little bit more risk. Your foundation of safe and guaranteed, things that no matter what happens in the economy, are going to be there for you 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever that time horizon is for you, versus those things that you can comfortably take a little bit of risk with. So, one of the things that I talk about I teach a workshop called Money 101, where we talk about fundamentals and principles about money, how money works, where we learn about compound interest. A lot of people don't really understand, how that 250 a month turns into $240,000 over 25 years, and understanding how that works, both for you when you're saving and investing, and against you when you're in debt at 25% on a credit card, things like that. So getting to the place where you are experiencing a little bit of wealth, right? And different people define that differently. I know for me, I want financial independence. I want to see my clients in a position where if they couldn't work anymore, that their assets were going to take care of them. So figuring out what that is for you. I know growing up, my parents taught me about real estate investing. That's what they knew, right? My parents were into that, and so they taught me what they knew. They didn't know anything about the stock market, and so they stayed away from it. They couldn't teach me what they didn't know, and so I feel blessed that my parents had some things about money and wealth that they were able to pass on. The one key thing was paying yourself first. That was something that my dad taught me from the minute that I started to get an allowance or receive money for my birthday. 40% was what he required that I save. Oh, tell me about it. When I got my first job, I was angry and he didn't care. But it created a habit for me that I pay myself off the top. And when you do that, once you're out of the hole, right, and you're comfortable, paying yourself first and making that non-negotiable. This is money that you put away that you don't even think about. You can pretend like it doesn't exist, except that you do have to pay attention to what, the yields on your money, but paying yourself off the top and getting yourself into a position where you actually own assets. How you do that, there are lots of ways to do that. How you choose to do that really doesn't matter. But a rental, people think of their personal residence as an asset. My personal residence doesn't pay me a dime. I don't consider it an asset. Yeah. Is there equity? Yes, there's some equity there, but it doesn't pay me anything. Rental property actually pays me. That's money that I can use and money that I don't have to work to get. My investments pay me, and they will pay me more down the line. And so changing your thinking, like getting yourself into a position where you are learning from different sources so that you can figure out the best path for you. It's not the same for everyone. And anybody that tells you that there's a cookie cutter way to do it, run.
Yes, yes. So I will give a plug now for the Black Family Wealth Challenge, Family Wealth Challenge.black. We have families that are coming together to set up family banks. And one part of the family bank is once you start as a family putting money together, whether it's just you by yourself or you and a spouse or you and, siblings or cousins, etc., then coming up with a portfolio of items that you want to invest in. And some of the things are traditional, like the stock market, but then there are other alternative assets out there that we aren't even tapping into. And just because they're alternative assets doesn't mean they're not, they're super risky. Some of them are alternative assets that offer, great yields, great return on investment, but they still are not as risky as others. Some of them, you can shoot for the moon as well. So I wanted to talk about the Family Wealth Challenge because we have 3 people coming between December and January to talk about different types of alternative investments as well. And one of them is a woman who her appendix burst, and she had all of these alternative investments all over the place. And she talked about the fact that even though she was in the hospital for, I don't know, maybe it was a week or something like that, she would look on her phone and she had money coming in from those alternative investments. And it was at that point that she recognized the power of having that money working for her, because she wasn't able to work in her business at that point. And I think that those types of stories and understandings, and then figuring out how we're able to do that for ourselves in our own, again, personal economies is so important. And it is important to go from broke to comfortable, and then from comfortable to wealthy is a big thing. And like you said, wealth means different things to different people,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
When you shared that story, it made me think of something I would love to talk about, and a lot of people are not familiar. And for me, this is so important that no matter what subject we talk about at Wine, Women, and Wealth or Money 101, we always talk about this one subject, and that's living benefits. And that is a part of the protection layer, which allows people to access access their life insurance early if they become seriously ill. I had 3 clients last year who needed to access their living benefits. One of them was a woman who's been a client of mine for 5 years, and she's single, no children. She had not a huge life insurance policy, $250,000, but she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer last year. And so she contacted me and said, tell me more, remind me about these living benefits. What can I do? And so we made a living benefits claim. And within about 3 weeks, I was able to deliver a check to her for $212,000.
Wow.
And so what that has meant for her over the last 18 months or so is that she's been able to focus on getting well instead of worrying about how she was going to pay her bills.
Mhm.
And, people think, oh my gosh, that costs so much. She was 41 and healthy at the time she got the policy. And,
Mhm.
health plays a big factor, age and health, into how much it costs. But it cost her $19 and some change a month for that policy. So
Wow.
collectively, over the 4 years that she had it, she paid less than $1,000 in premiums. And when she needed it, it delivered a check for $212,000. And so, that little bit to provide that layer of protection, what that does is it protects everything else that you're doing. Because had she not had it, financially, I don't know where she would be, because she probably would be back to work at this point. Thankfully, her treatments have worked. She's, cancer free at this point. And if not for the pandemic, she probably would have gone back to work. But because she has that money, she's not forced to return to work with a compromised immune system before she's
Mhm.
ready. She can make the choice to stay home and do some other things. So, money isn't everything, but it makes a heck of a difference in a situation like that. Oh, yeah. And her retirement account is not depleted. Her emergency fund is still intact. All of that. Had she not had that, she would be starting at ground zero right now, having not worked for 18 months, because most people are not in a position to weather a storm that long.
Yeah. I mean, I think that part of when you gave that story, I thought about digging your well before you need it. Um, Basically, in other words, what I'm saying is if you take the time to set these things up when you are healthy, when you are clear in your mind, when you're able to make rational decisions, when you're able to work with someone like Erica and really say, okay, here's my situation, this is where I think my life is headed. What do you think? Um, when the time comes when bad things happen, because bad things always do happen,
Mhm.
then you're not making decisions from a place of desperation.
That's right.
And I think that all of us, and another thing is going back, if you already have some things in place, some of us need to go back and check with our financial advisors or financial coaches and say, hey, it's been 5 years. Let's do a checkup. I'm a fan of an annual checkup physically, and I really do need to start doing an annual wealth checkup as well.
Yes.
I will admit that. I have not, and I hadn't really thought about it until we started going through this real 10K project process. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay. There are so many things that we're missing out on, pieces of information we don't know from, bottom up and top down. And I feel like that is what we're called to do here. So did you have anything else with regards to going from comfortable to wealthy before we get into the generational wealth?
I mean, I think really what we've just talked about, that comfortable to wealthy is
Mhm,
getting in a process where you are paying yourself and you are building that nest egg over and above what it takes to handle your general finances, and creating those assets that are going to
mhm,
help you to get to that generational wealth piece. I would say also during this whole process of comfortable to wealthy is making sure that you're educating your children, because it will do you no good to pass on wealth to your children for them to squander it.
mhm,
So, involving your children in all the things that you are doing. And I know that talking about money has been taboo, and it's taboo in a lot of households, but we have to unveil that, because how are our children expected to do well? How are we going to prevent them from making the mistakes that we've made if we don't include them in the conversation? So, I think it's really important to make sure that your children are understanding what's going on in your finances, good or bad, because sometimes as parents, we're able to teach them what not to do
mhm.
based on the things that we have done. And then we're also, as we get better, able to teach them what to do as we move forward, so that when we are able to hand them a head start in life, that they do smart things with it and they actually grow that so that the next generation is even better off.
Yeah. So you have a couple of comments here and a couple of questions in YouTube, actually. So Snuggle668 is saying, Starbucks, this lady is big time. So talking about your Starbucks habit. And Legacy Driven asks, how do you deal with family members who don't want to address their financial problems?
Mm. That's a tough one. You can't make grown people do anything. And I guess it depends on your relationship to that family member too, as to whether their financial missteps actually impact you personally, or, your personal finances or not. It can be really challenging when that person is a spouse, right? If they are not on the same page with you with financial things. Honestly, people think that infidelity is the cause of most divorces, and it's not, it's finance. So, if it's someone other than your spouse, you probably don't have to fix it, right? Um, if it's your children, that can be challenging, but sometimes they have to stumble and they have to suffer the consequences of their own actions in order to learn. As much as we want to save them from skinning their knees and all of those things, sometimes we can't. And sometimes the only way for someone to learn is to actually make the mistake, is as painful as it is for us to watch. When it comes to, that family member, if that happens to be a spouse, those are things that you actually do have to try to work through if you want to get to the other side with them. But I would say any other family member, you can invite them to the conversation. But if they're not willing to take it on, you have to find a way to allow them to be, right? You can't make them do it. I deal with that as well.
Yeah, Legacy Driven is saying it's my mom. So moms are
Mm,
tough. I can tell you from somebody who, my mom and I lived together for a while, and then we ended up, I got my own apartment and she had her house. And then we decided a few years ago to come back and live together again under the same roof. And, moms are tough because you want to respect mom while also trying to say, but hey, are we able to do these things as well?
yeah.
So I think it does depend a little bit on your mother. Is your mother the type who you could say, for example, would you do this for me? Is there something small that she could start off with doing it for you? For example, we've been talking about estate planning here within the Family Wealth Challenge. So, Mom, would you come and, talk to this person, and would you do it for me? In my situation, it was the opposite. My mother had to convince me to sit down with the estate planning people. Um, and the reason I shunned it was because I didn't want to think about her mortality. And we've
Right.
had those conversations here at the 10K Project. It may be that way for your mom. I don't know enough about your situation, but if you remember, Esther Boykin, for part of the Black Family Wealth Challenge, was we had two people come in: Esther Boykin, who is a marriage and family therapist, and Desiree Fisher, who is a estate planning consultant. I would really suggest that you listen to that. There was a lot of discussion about the emotion that comes up because of these conversations. And Esther gave us some really good tips and tools and strategies that we can use in order to talk with our family members, our different family members. So if you're not a part of the Family Wealth Challenge, the Black Family Wealth Challenge is specifically for us with regards to how do we build wealth and preserve it within our families. It's familywealthchallenge.black. It is $100 until the end of the year. I promise you, the price is going up to $297 because we've had such great response from it that we've been told to turn it into a real course for people. So if you are not a part of that, familywealthchallenge.black is $100 until the end of December, and then the price goes up. So
Family's the
um,
hardest though.
yeah,
Sometimes it will a lot of times it's helpful if you can have a third
mhm,
party
yeah,
share that message with a family member.
yeah,
I know with dealing with my own parents as they're getting older and um, trying to help them to handle things with their finances.
mhm,
They've always been in the opposite position where they've been instructing me and they've been advising me, and now the tables have kind of turned.
mhm,
And it is difficult, like you said earlier, Cherie, being respectful and yet seeing things that maybe they aren't seeing at this point, and it can be challenging. So a third party, whether it's the Family Wealth Challenge, I think that's awesome.
mhm,
If she could get her mom to participate in that, she might
mhm,
hear it from a third party and hear it differently
yeah.
than she hears it from you.
Legacy Driven is saying it's very challenging. And what about our best friend? I would say, what about our best friend? Sometimes you have to be like that. Especially, it would be different if it was what about your dad or what about her husband. But I don't know. I'm a part of me is like, if they don't have any legal claim, you
Right.
know, um, sometimes. So saying, I just am very worried because I am building a strong financial future and I don't want to damage my progress and focus.
Uh,
So, okay, so I have an opinion about that, and I'm sure Erica does as well. Um, I believe that nobody can damage your progress and focus but you,
mhm.
not even mom, not even mom. So if you are on your grind and you have this vision for your financial future, sometimes people need to see the train moving in order for them to get on board. So you can, I don't know what else, to suggest to you beyond that. Maybe Erica has a couple of things. That's just the way that I'm living.
I'll say one thing about that because it is different when it's your parents, because you may feel a sense of responsibility to take care of mom if she doesn't do the right things that are going to help her take care of herself. So I do get that.
Mhm,
Um, and I, 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 I have an opinion very similar to Cherie's. I think that it's incumbent upon us to put our own mask on first. And I don't mean like COVID mask. I'm talking
mhm,
about safety mask Put your
Mhm.
own mask on first before assisting others. And that includes mom and dad, children. I see so many people that spend all of their money, their energy, their time taking care of their children, taking care of their, not so much parents, but children mostly, but in your case, maybe parents, that they neglect themselves. And what your loved ones need most is for you to be whole. You are no good to them or anybody else if you are in pieces. So you have to. The best thing you can do to show love for your mother is make sure that you are taking care of yourself and that your finances are whole. Then you can look at helping her if she's not willing to come along with you and help herself. But take care of you first. And it's
Yeah,
not selfish. It's what has to be done because if you don't, you're both going to be broken.
yeah. I think about an old Tyler Perry play. Uh, I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking about the fact that, he would say, "You and I are friends," for example. And I know this is your mom, but he in the play, he was Medea. "You and I are friends, but if you don't change this over here, we can't, I'm not going to help you. We can't get along." So sometimes it is saying, okay, in order, my father was very much like this. These are my parameters and I will help you as long as you're in those parameters. Again, I know it's a little bit different for mom, but sometimes with mom it is even, look, I'm doing this and I'm going to need you to do A before I can do B. Um, so it's complicated, and I think that's where again the Esther Boykin um, discussion about that may also become helpful, and it could be going to see a therapist or having a third party involved in the conversation, or a lot of it does depend on the situation. So but those are great questions. So I want to do a final thing, which is generational wealth, right?
Yeah.
You've built up these coffers. You've built up, healthy 6 figures, 7 figures of wealth. What are some of the things that we do to prepare not only kids, but grandkids and great grandkids? And I also want to say one thing, I'm sorry, before I let you speak. On December 14th, we do have a woman coming on December 14th at 6 p.m. Holly Reed is coming on. She wrote a book called Teach Your Child to Fish, and it's all about talking to your young kids about financial literacy. So we want to let people know that that's like one of our Christmas surprises. So that's December 14th at 6 p.m. For people to learn games and exercises that you can do with your young kids. But Erica, I wanted to pass that off to you. Generational wealth.
Yeah, I love that subject. And I think, you know, that was a great segue into that because I believe it's super important to make sure that your kids and grandkids are well educated about wealth. I think in some families, too much is given, and there's not enough appreciation for what it take or what it took, right, to earn that wealth. And teaching children work ethic, teaching them about saving and investing, teaching them about debt before they go to college, understanding credit cards and what they mean and what they can represent, what they can do for you positively and what they can hurt, how they can hurt you. That education piece I think is critical. um, Also, I'll share another quick story about one of my clients. This was a gentleman who had created this generational wealth, right? He had created a big pile of money. He had probably a little over $1 million, and he was 84 at the time I met him. And I said, "What is the purpose of this money?" He was really upset because his money was in CDs at a bank and he wasn't earning anything on it. And I said, "So what's the purpose of the money?" He said, "Well, it's for my daughter and my grandchildren." I said, "So why don't you give it to them now?" He said, "Well, I might need it for my own health." Or, he had a wife who was a couple years older and not super healthy, who he was caring for at home. So I might need it for our health, and well-being. I said, "Okay, great. So what portion of it would you be comfortable with doing something else with?" Well, one we finally settled on was we took about half of it and we put it into a special type of life insurance policy, which immediately made it about 20% more. So if he had passed away the next day, his family would have gotten 20% more tax advantaged, right? The proceeds of a life insurance policy. And so understanding that there are some creative ways to transfer that money from one generation to the other, what you're looking for is to make sure that they don't squander it, to make sure that that money will continue to grow and be able to be passed to the next generation. And how do we get it to them in the most tax advantaged way? What you don't want is to spend your whole life accumulating this wealth and then for it to be 40 or 50% less when it goes to your children. And so the whole idea of getting with a competent estate planner and looking at how to protect that money as it moves from generation to generation and keeping your children involved in the conversation so that they know what to do with that money when they get it and it continues to grow. We have been at a disadvantage in so many ways as Black people because we were left out of home ownership for the most part, not being able to get loans. We can do that. Is it harder for us? It still is, right? But we can do it. So owning a home and being able to pass those assets is super, super important, and doing it in a way that is going to be tax advantaged and smooth. When we don't take care of those things, and so many people, even of means, are not handling it well. How many celebrities have we seen that have died without a will, without that estate plan in place, with millions of dollars that are going to be taken by attorneys and the federal government because they did not plan well? And so whether it's at the millions of dollars scale or the hundreds of thousands or the tens of thousands or whatever it is that you have, don't you want it to go to your children and grandchildren instead of to taxes? So those sorts of things I think are very, very important for us to consider on the front end.
Yeah, I love it. I couldn't agree more. We are at the end of our hour. It was fantastic having you here. You definitely gave us some great practical tips, which is I'm a huge fan of. Why don't you tell the family how they can get in touch with you for more information?
Absolutely. Well, I would love, at least for the ladies, to consider joining me for Wine, Women, and Wealth. Our next one is on Friday, December 11th. Everything is virtual right now, so it doesn't matter where you are in the country. You can tap in. You can find out what's going on. Take a look at my website at fiveringsnationscapital.com. There is a list of upcoming events there and lots of tips and ideas. In addition, we're on Facebook, Wine, Women, and Wealth, Nations Capital, and beyond. So check us out on those platforms. And I would love to see you at Wine, Women, and Wealth or Money 101 workshop. That is co-ed. And the dates and details are on the website.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Everyone's saying great discussion. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we will see you on the next webinar. Bye,
All right. Thanks so
everybody.
much, Sari.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome. Take care. Bye, everybody.